Section 3 of Women of the War by Barbara McLaren. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by T.R. Love. 6. Miss Harriet Sprott, the Misses Playfair, and Lady Baden-Powell. The Young Men's Christian Association commenced work in the camps in France as soon as the war began. For many years it had been accustomed to provide huts in the summer camps at home, but since the war the organization has increased to such an extent that it now covers a vast field of enterprise. The YMCA huts and those of the church army have proved the salvation of the men who, when off duty, had nowhere to go, while in the camps the canteens provide an opportunity for them to buy small necessaries, tobacco, or any supplementary food in addition to their army rations. The work of the ladies in the YMCA huts in France is largely responsible for their great success. This work is arranged by a committee under Princess Helena Victoria, with the Countess of Bessborough as honorary secretary, and it is owing to their insight and skillful organization that it has been so successfully managed. The workers, whose service is entirely voluntary, sign on for 4 months, pay all their own expenses, traveling, board, lodging, etc., and provide their uniform, dark gray coats and skirts with blue facings. Many of them have been living in France for over 2 years in the simplest accommodation, devoid of all luxury, and devoting themselves entirely to the work. The best illustration of what they are doing can be taken from the experiences of a few typical workers. Miss Harriet Sprott manages a district which has its headquarters in a base town under the shadow of a great cathedral. Describing the average day of her workers, Miss Sprott says that their mornings till 12 o'clock are spent in preparation of the canteen counters, so that the quickest possible distribution of refreshments and other small purchases may be made to the soldiers in the short hours fixed by the camp authorities which they may spend at the hut. No money is taken over the counter. Tickets have to be bought. It is usual for the queue of men waiting to buy tickets to extend the whole length of the room. On a busy night it even stretches into the billiard room and curls back halfway up the main hut. Old YMCA habitués know the arrangements so well that no time is wasted, but Miss Sprott reports that it takes double the time to serve a newly arrived draft, to whom the French money and its purchasing power are sources of bewilderment. The heaviest part of the work is always at night, but the men are unanimously said to be so good-natured, patient, and orderly that, however dense the crowd, they all get served in time. When the hut closes, the workers may be justified in feeling that valuable work has been accomplished and the night's rest well earned. In every hut there is a small library counter where postcards are sold, note paper is given out, books or games are lent, and games of billiards are arranged, a bell being rung every 20 minutes to mark the close of each game. Miss Sprott writes, "To sit down here is considered a rest, but one can have a busy time. Private A brings his watch and hopes it will not be too much trouble to get it mended for him. You take down his name and hope the watch will not get mixed up with some half-dozen others passing through your hands, and that you will be able to get it back in time from the watchmaker before Private A goes up the line. He himself has apparently no misgivings. Indeed, the implicit faith of himself and his fellows in one's unworthy self is something quite touching. Many questions are asked and answered. I have been consulted on religious matters and listened to innumerable family histories. The first move in a confidential talk comes when Tommy pulls out his paybook and spreads before you the photos of his relatives. To most of us, the hour spent each evening at this little counter is one to look forward to. Another worker is Miss Lilias Playfair, who, with a group of other ladies, went to a base town in France in February 1915. A canteen had been started in the only available place, a very small, inconvenient room. But even so, Miss Playfair reports that it was packed every evening and most of the day. Gradually, proper huts were built in the outlying camps and in the town, and there are now over 10 huts and 2 cinemas in this district, which Miss Playfair and her sister Miss Audrey Playfair manage in alternate spells. Describing her work, Miss Playfair says, "Besides serving at the canteens and helping with the arranging and ordering of food, we do most of the entertainments. I have organized a small orchestra which plays at different huts, and last year we had a most successful Pierrot troupe. We hope shortly to produce a revue and 2 or 3 short plays. French classes are held regularly, and the men are keen to learn. It is hard work, as our hours are long, but it is very interesting, and the men are so appreciative and say that they do not know how they could endure things without the YMCA." How much the Tommies appreciate the presence of the YMCA ladies may be seen in the following extract written by a Tommy describing what he calls a heaven-sent organization. "When I entered the hut, I was greeted with that glad smile of welcome which I shall always associate with the YMCA by real English ladies, the first I had seen for over 7 months, except the nurses, of course. I only wish to God that I could adequately describe my feelings, and I know mine were the same as thousands of my brothers in arms. It seemed to me that amidst all the awful turmoil and din, with the horrors of the retreat and the first battle for Ypres imperishably photographed on my memory, I had found a haven of rest." Volumes could be written by the lady workers on the mingled humor and pathos in their interviews with the men. In a letter to a friend at home, a worker says, "All the time out here life is so full of humor, if only one had the gift of describing it. At one moment one is doing something for a very correct general, and at the next one is in a hut having tea with a soldier. Ex-greengrocer, quite charming, but the unmistakable type. Everyone who interests the greengrocer has to sign their names in his Bible. Then one takes an Australian out shopping, and he tips one 2 francs for one's trouble." Quite apart from their ministrations to the men's material needs, the influence of the YMCA ladies in France has been invaluable, cheering, encouraging, and helping the men in countless ways in their brief hours of leisure, and relieving by their presence the endless monotony of their life of discipline. Among the interesting features of the YMCA work are the scout huts started by Lady Baden-Powell at 2 of the bases. The ladies who work in them are mostly scout masters and wear the scout uniform, old Boy Scouts amongst the troops being their most keenly appreciative patrons. Lady Baden-Powell went to France in October 1915 to organize the work when the huts were built, and she worked for some months in the first 2 huts. In June 1916, a Girl Guide hut was built from funds earned by Girl Guides, who, forbidden by their rules from collecting money, each did a day's work for the fund. Lady Baden-Powell is putting her energies into developing the Girl Guide movement on the same scale as the Boy Scouts. Realizing the responsibilities of citizenship which the opportunities of the war have brought to the women of the country, the advantages are manifest of a voluntary training for girls on the lines which have been so successful with boys, and the Girl Guide movement is a step to this end. 7. Miss Agnes Borthwick. No woman's work has more directly furthered the prosecution of the war than that of Miss Agnes Borthwick, who within 1 year has risen to the unique position, for a woman, of works manager in a great munition factory. When Miss Borthwick sees the trains laden with ammunition streaming out of the factory straight for Southampton, she must feel with justifiable pride that she and her 4,000 girls are working for the country as vitally as the soldiers who will fire the unceasing stream of shells which the girls are sending to them day by day. Miss Borthwick's rise to her present position of responsibility has been rapid, even judged by the standards of war promotion. She is of Scottish birth, a woman of high educational attainments. She took an honours M.A. degree in English at Glasgow University in 1912, and subsequently held a research scholarship at Bryn Mawr College, USA. Miss Borthwick spent 2 years studying in America, and from Bryn Mawr went to Whittier Hall, University of Columbia, New York, and Barnard Hall, Radcliffe College, Cambridge, Massachusetts. She also did some research in Harvard Library. At the outbreak of the war, Miss Borthwick returned to England, and in November 1915, when the newly formed Ministry of Munitions appealed for women workers, she volunteered and went to Woolwich for a course of training in both the theoretical and practical work of shell and cartridge filling. At the end of 5 weeks, she obtained a first grade or excellent certificate. In January 1916, Miss Borthwick was sent to Georgetown by Paisley, where a new filling factory was in course of construction. Here she began work with only 24 girls. At first, she and her workers scrubbed the shops, cleaned the newly built blocks of buildings, and unloaded the trucks of empty shells, which arrived at the factory ready to be filled with explosives. By the end of January, the shops were sufficiently prepared for the real work to begin, and 200 girls were taken on and instructed in filling. After that, the factory grew rapidly. Every week from 30 to 50 girls were engaged, who started work in the new blocks, which were taken over from the builders as fast as they were finished. 2 months later, Miss Borthwick was promoted from forewoman to assistant works manager, and in May, on the promotion of the works manager, she took his place. By the end of 1916, the 24 original workers had increased to 4,000 girls, and when an inspector came round to inquire into the question of labor dilution, he was unable to eliminate a single man, for the only men employed in the factory were a few engineers and mechanical experts. Not only do the girls do all the filling of 18-pounder shells and cartridges of all sizes, but they also do the packing of the filled shells, and the trolleying to the railway. The medical and nursing staff, the police patrol, the fire patrol, and the canteen workers are all women. Work never ceases night and day. The girls work in shifts of 8 3/4 hours. There are now 130 shops, and the factory covers such a large acreage that its boundary is about 5 miles round. Above everything else, it must not be forgotten that the entire work of this factory is what is called danger work. Although every possible precaution is taken for the safety and health of the workers, in all handling of powerful explosives, the element of danger must be present. Miss Borthwick is only 27. She is a fresh-looking girl with a very quiet manner, suggesting a reserve of resolution and courage eminently necessary in her work. On her shoulders rests the heavy responsibility for the successful working of the factory, and she has helped to develop it in an incredibly short time, from a few huts to the throbbing hive of industry which it is today. Owing to her efficiency, and because she has never failed to make good whatever she has undertaken, she has earned this great opportunity of service to the country. She talks of her work as calmly and naturally as if there were nothing remarkable about it. Yet she made this admission while on a recent 3 days' leave. Until I come away from the factory, I hadn't realized how heavy and how unending the responsibility is. End of section 3.